Chapter 1544 Chicken Thief. Chapter 1544 Chicken Thief. What? This is actually stolen property. What caused Ling Han to be stuck between laughter and tears was that Go Li actually looked incredibly furious, and loudly shouted, "You brat, I was so kind to invite you to share some wine, and you actually allowed me to eat something that has been stolen." He raised the roast meat in his hand high, and looked like he was going to throw it down. Then, after some thought, he took a big bite. Immediately, grease spurted in all directions. As he chewed, he was still indistinctly muttering, "I look down on you. I especially disdain you." He looked again at that girl, and said, "Fairy, I support you, hit him." This. Ling Han looked at Go Li. Previously, he had thought that this was a savage that had walked out from the wilderness, and had a forthright and frank character, but in this moment, he understood just how gravely wrong his impression had been. A book could not be judged by its cover. This fuck was a guy that would screw others over. The girl also paused. All of a sudden, she could not judge the situation, but when she saw Go Li was still eating ravenously, rage rose up in her heart involuntarily. Brandishing a sword, she delivered a slash. "Give me back my green treasure chicken." This girl was extraordinary. As she shot out a slash, a galaxy appeared behind her. There were at least a few hundred heavenly bodies within. Medium extreme of the eternal river tier. Ling Han was surprised. It seemed like the overall level of cultivation here was not too bad. The first two people he encountered here were both in the eternal river tier. However, he hurriedly leaped away because this young girl treated him like Go Li, and both of them became the target of her attacks. "Fairy, you're beating on the wrong person. This really has nothing to do with me. I only appeared at the wrong place at the wrong time." Go Li was also repeatedly dodging, but did not fight back. This was precisely being partial to her from whom they had taken from. The man was really quite gentlemanly. Ling Han was involuntarily struck speechless. This Go Li was really shameless to a whole new level. He actually lied right in his face, and did not even blush. Just surrender and be captured. The girl was exasperated as she wielded her sword in a dazzling, skillful manner. "Or I will kill both of you." She was really not just saying this. Multiple demonic patterns glowed on her sword's blade, fully arousing the might within, causing her battle prowess to be uplifted to a new height. Ling Han was a little strained. His power was not inferior to her, but the gap in terms of regulations was a little too big. He had just reached the middle stage of the low extreme, and so his grasp of regulations was also limited to the early stage of the medium extreme. He did not have any more battle prowess than that. Of course, this was his battle prowess, without considering the 9 heavens flame and the limitless 9 deaths formation. His physique was also not taken into consideration. These trump cards were all unaffected by the regulations of the netherworld. Go Li saw how he was dodging and parrying the attacks with strain, and he involuntarily looked sympathetic. He said, "Brother, since you can't hold on, don't force yourself." Obediently apologized to this fairy, and the fairy would definitely take into account that this is your first offense and forgive you. The girl, meanwhile, was exploding in fury. She only had a total of 5 green treasure chickens, and she had raised every single one of them with great care. Even she could not bear to eat them, yet now 3 of them had been stolen by these 2 thieves in one go, so how could she not be furious? She wanted nothing more than to tear the 2 of them into pieces. "You were the one who stole it. I was just passing by, and was innocently dragged into the matter." Ling Han sighed. Go Li, though, paled in shock. "Brother, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't irresponsibly speak as you wish. It was clearly you who is the chicken thief. Why do you wrong me? What animosity do you have with me? Do you have to be like this? What animosity do you have with me, then?" Ling Han asked, shaking his head with a smile. Though he was in a very sorry state now, he had even evaded being hunted down by a saint, so he naturally would not take a cultivator in the medium extreme of the eternal river tier to heart. "Surrender your life." When the girl saw how they were pushing the blame onto each other, she couldn't help but become even angrier. With a battle cry, an aura of ice surged from her, and the whole heaven and earth had become incredibly cold. It felt as if even divine blood would be frozen into ice. Discretion is the better part of valor, and no good man would fight with a woman. Brother, you hold on, I will leave first. Go Li swayed falsely, and turned around and fled. But he had not run a few steps when he involuntarily gritted his teeth. Shaking his head, he asked, Brother, what do you mean by running with me? Nothing in particular. In any case, we are both running, so we can keep each other company. Ling Han followed closely behind Go Li. He naturally could not possibly stay there to continue being a target. But I do not want to be accompanied by you, Go Li exclaimed, hopping mad. Your objection is futile. Run, or she will catch up to us, Ling Han said, smiling. Because Go Li had been stomping in anger for a while, he had surpassed him, and the girl had already caught up with them. She slashed out with her sword, and froze the area. Go Li quickly ran like mad. He was actually following Ling Han. It was obvious that he had the same line of thought as Ling Han. He did not want to become an unfortunate fool that would continue to be a target. His shameless thought was that if I would be sinking, I would simply sink the whole ship as well. Brother, hold on, with company, you won't be lonely, he shouted. Scram, I don't know you. Ling Han waved him off. But I know you. Ling Han, Brother Ling, right? Go Li was still calling out from behind him. His voice was extraordinarily loud, as if he was afraid that the young girl could not hear him clearly enough. Fuck, this guy was definitely doing it deliberately. You chicken thief, Ling Han exclaimed in reprimand. How could such a decent man like me pilfer? Go Li exclaimed resolutely, looking very righteous, while he was still eating the roast meat ravenously. He couldn't help but praise, so delicious. Damn it. Damn it. The girl behind them had already gone mad with fury. She continuously brandished her sword in strikes. She wanted to apprehend both Ling Han and Go Li to offer a sacrifice to her green treasure chickens. Go Li was even more infuriating. Not only was he still eating the chicken meat, he was even spitting out the bones over his shoulder like mad, causing the girl to become even more furious. Her whole head of raven locks was already standing on ends, becoming as white as snow. Water heaven art, the girl shouted. She suddenly stopped, her left hand forming a seal. Wong, all the water vapor in the heaven and earth rose, becoming multiple crystalline structures. Every crystal contained a tiny imitation of her. This was too compressed. Ling Han and Go Li rushed forwards, and inevitably would have to crash into these crystals, and experience a sudden heavy blow right down on their heads. But just at this moment, that terrifying physique of Ling Han's showed its might. This kind of collision was completely harmless to him. He did not even have to slow his speed. Meanwhile, Go Li was shouting loudly. He ran madly after Ling Han as if a fire was lit under him. They soon rushed out of the area surrounded by the water crystals, and this girl had to execute this technique from the same spot to channel this technique. When she withdrew the technique and continued her pursuit, Ling Han and Go Li were already an unknown distance away from her. Despicable thieves, I will definitely find you too and make you pay the price. The furious shout of the girl rang out behind them. That had been transmitted through divine sense, otherwise, her voice could not possibly have caught up with Ling Han and his companion. Ling Han ran for a while longer before he finally stopped. Go Li also stopped, and panted as he said, Brother, you are really a fast runner. Brother? Ling Han asked, smiling faintly. Go Li quickly waved his hand. We have been thieves together and shared the spoils. What else can we be if not brothers? I say, brother, don't look so aggrieved. I very rarely acknowledge others. I have a high opinion of you. Ling Han chuckled, but did not make a move. Though this Go Li had screwed him over, he did not have a bad nature. That was because he had only parried and dodged under the girl's attacks, just like him. If it had really been an extremely vicious person, he would definitely have fought back a long time ago. Just for that, Ling Han believed that though this Go Li was definitely the type to screw others over, he could not be considered a truly bad guy. Chapter 1545, Treasure Exchange. Chapter 1545 Treasure Exchange. Brother, come. Brother Li will bring you to show off and fly. Go Li seemed like he did not take the previous incident to heart, and appeared very simple-minded. Ho ho, you're planning to screw me over again? Ling Han asked calmly as he drew out a roast chicken and began to eat. As Go Li watched, he couldn't help but drool. He had finished eating his 2 roast chickens, and looking at Ling Han feasting now, with his nose smelling that alluring aroma, he couldn't help but become restless, and finally said, "Brother, give me a chicken leg." Ling Han laughed loudly. He believed that a glutton could not possibly be a bad guy, but not being a bad guy definitely did not mean he was a good guy. He shook his head, and retorted, "If you want to eat, go and steal it yourself." What a joke. Is Brother Li the kind of person who would do that? Go Li exclaimed righteously, but then his face became a grimace. Only 2 chickens, a cock and hen, is left behind and they can lay eggs. I can't just give up the future delicacies to satisfy a momentary greed, right? Ling Han was astounded. I didn't think that you are the kind of person to take the big picture into consideration. He deliberately emphasized the word picture, and Go Li immediately understood what he was insinuating. He couldn't help but leap up. "Brat, you are so filthy. I am not as shameless as you. King of filth. Chicken thief." The 2 of them each gave the other a nickname, and then both of them broke into laughter. "It's about time. Let's go," Go Li suddenly said. "Go where?" Ling Han asked. "Yi, aren't you here to participate in the treasure exchange?" Go Li was surprised. "Oh, treasure exchange?" Ling Han felt an involuntary cheer. He still lacked a few level 13 godly metals. As long as the divine demon sword reached level 14, he would be able to improve it by 3 levels in one go, and rush up to the height of level 17. "Saint Tool. Let's go, go, where is it?" Go Li scratched his head. "I thought you were here for this, yet you don't even know where the treasure exchange is held. Hey, it can't be that you also don't know that there are 2 mighty figures agreeing to battle this time, right?" "I really don't know. What kind of mighty figures?" Ling Han asked without the slightest shame. "I am really defeated by you." Go Li shook his head repeatedly. "I'll explain on the way." The 2 of them set out, with Go Li leading the way. Under the feet of 2 eternal river tiers, the great mountains and rivers were quickly passed as if they were simply outlines. They were progressing at an astonishingly rapid pace. As it turned out, this planet was called Cold Cloud's Planet, and belonged to the Aurora Galaxy. The Aurora Galaxy was a superlarge galaxy, and very coincidentally, 2 demon masters were actually born at the same time here. They were equivalent to the saints of the immortal realm. As the saying goes, 2 tigers cannot share one mountain. Though the 2 demon masters did not have a life and death feud with each other, they had always wanted to confirm who was stronger between the 2 of them. Thus, every 100,000 years, they would conduct a spar. A battle on the level of demon masters. How astonishing was this? Could everyone witness such an event at another time? Thus, this also became a distinguished gathering of the Aurora Galaxy. Every time the agreed battle was conducted, it would attract a great number of people coming to watch. Of course, demon masters would naturally be fighting in the skies. Otherwise, when they finished their battle, it would also mean that the whole galaxy could rest in peace too. Because there were too many people coming, everyone would trade the treasures that they themselves could not use. As time passed, this gradually became a distinguished gathering too. Now, there was a group of young king tiers gathering in the Black Jade Mountains to participate in a treasure exchange. Ling Han nodded internally. Since they were king tiers, it should be no problem for them to produce some level 13 godly metal. Slightly less than half a day passed, and they arrived at the foot of a mountain. This was a completely black mountain peak, and was covered with black vines. The leaves had a jade-like luster, but because there were too many of them, the mountain peak looked like a piece of black jade. "Filth King, follow your brother Li. These people have many rules, and if you are not strong enough, you won't be allowed to climb up at all," Go Li said. Ling Han merely smiled, and did not say anything. Because of the regulations, he looked to only be in the middle stage of the low extreme of the Eternal River tier, and his normal battle prowess was also in the early stage of the medium extreme. Though he had surpassed 3 stars, this was not enough in the face of king tiers. There were many people gathered at the foot of the mountain. The majority of them were seated in a cross-legged position, and a small number were issuing challenges in the surrounding area, appearing very warlike. Seeing that Ling Han and Go Li were planning to ascend the mountain, a person immediately stepped out to stop them. Want to ascend? Do you have the kind of strength that qualifies you for that? Go Li waved his fist. You can come and try it out. All right. The person immediately rushed forwards, drew his saber, and slashed out. Peng. Go Li's fist shot out, the force of his fist becoming a wild beast, and sent the person flying abruptly. With a cold flash, the saber in the person's grip was also sent flying out of his hand. After this attack, the people around them suddenly became well-behaved. Let's go, Go Li said uncaringly. Ling Han did not take it to heart, either. If he exploded with his maximum battle prowess, then only those who had cultivated the pinnacle level in the Eternal River tier could be a match for him. He naturally would not take a minor character that could be defeated in a single move like this to heart. The two of them walked on the mountain path, but they had only walked 30-odd meters when they saw a person seated on a large boulder. His right hand was holding a sword scabbard, his expression icy cold. Ling Han was certain that this man was stronger than the people at the foot of the mountain. Interesting. These people knew to find their positions based on their abilities. Go Li did not say a word, and immediately rushed up and began fighting. That man was very strong, delivering a slash that stunned the skies, but compared to Go Li, he was still considerably inferior. Very soon, he was defeated, and stepped out of their way. Only then did Ling Han know that this was a very common happening in the Netherworld. When there was any kind of distinguished gathering, only those top-grade individuals could participate. Those who were defeated would be distributed in the surroundings according to their abilities. If there was a newcomer, they would have to fight their way up. No wonder no one directly flew to the summit. In the Netherworld, this was a rule that was common knowledge. Ling Han nodded internally. Thankfully, he had not spoken out, or others would definitely suspect that he was a country bumpkin that had popped out from some unknown corner. He didn't even know that kind of common knowledge. Every 30+ meters, there would be a person standing guard, and their abilities were getting stronger and stronger. Yet, Go Li would be stronger the stronger his opponent was. He managed to deal with all his opponents within 10 moves, and appeared to have unfathomable depths. Ling Han involuntarily laughed. What is it? Are you afraid that I would know too much about you? Go Li took a few looks at him, and then said, I don't know why, but my instincts tell me that you are not as weak as you look. In truth, I have killed a saint from the immortal realm before, Ling Han said with absolute seriousness. Pu. Go Li suddenly spluttered out in laughter. Clapping a hand on Ling Han's shoulder, he held his middle in bouts of laughter, and looked like he was almost going to tear up from laughing so much. Not only do you have filthy thoughts, you are also quite funny. I really have killed a saint before, Ling Han emphasized. En. Go Li nodded quickly, but judging by his mad laughter, it was obvious that he thought that Ling Han was telling a cold joke. Ling Han sighed. Why did no one believe him when he was seriously telling the truth? The two of them continued their climb up the mountain. Go Li was indeed very awesome, sweeping aside all opposition they encountered. Chapter 1546, Stoking the Flames. Chapter 1546, Stoking the Flames. Go Li was confident in himself, and believed that he would definitely be able to reach Dao in future, and enter into the Demon Master tier that everyone dreamed of. However, he was presently only in the medium extreme of the Eternal River tier, and those seated high up on the stone chairs were either king tiers in the high extreme of the Eternal River tier or veteran elites that were in the consummate level of the Eternal River tier. He was still too inexperienced now, and was not qualified to compete with these people yet. In future, I will definitely be able to sweep all of you outside, but now, I will restrain myself, he thought internally, but he had not foreseen that Ling Han would suddenly raise his voice, and shout incredibly loudly. Sure, suddenly, all eyes turned towards them. Of course, some of their eyes fell on Ling Han, but Go Li was definitely the center of their attention. What had this to do with him? Go Li grimaced internally. Previously, he had tricked Ling Han, and had initially thought they had formed a friendship from being thieves together when they had fled together. He had already put Ling Han out of his mind, but he did not think that this guy had not forgotten at all. He was screwing him over at this moment. What are you guys looking at? Don't you know that my brother Li is known as a king-tier assassin? If you continue to look, he will stomp on all of you, and you will be forced into submission. Ling Han looked completely like a lackey that was making use of his powerful connection as an intimidation tactic, and just the mere sight of him was infuriating. Is that right? A young man wearing a blue shirt walked out of the crowd. His hair was crimson red, his expression sinister, and his eyes were focused on Go Li. What are you looking at me for? Go Li chuckled, and said, this brother of mine likes to boast. Everyone, you do not have to take it seriously, just do whatever you should be doing, just ignore us. Ho ho, boasting so greatly just now, and now you're shrinking back. Another young man walked out, yet his hands were a pair of panther paws, and he was about 3 heads taller than the average person. Come, I really would like to see how this brother Li plans to stomp on all of us. A third young man leaped out. His complexion was especially pale, yet his eyes were jade green. He looked like a venomous snake. Go Li quickly waved his hand, and laughed. It was a joke, just a joke. Brother Li, are you even a man? You can tolerate that. Yet Ling Han was simply adding fuel to the fire. He was determined to start this fire at all costs. Go on, they are just 3 pests. Brother Li, you can defeat them even with only 1 hand. Is that right? These 3 people smirked coldly. In truth, they were not stupid, and knew that Ling Han was deliberately stoking the flames, but if a newcomer had come, they naturally had to estimate the latter's abilities. Come and fight me. The snake-eyed man moved first. He stretched out both arms, but it seemed as if they were boneless as they could endlessly twist and bend, which was impossible to defend against effectively. Go Li frowned, yet had no choice but to move. After all, he could not allow others to beat him, right? Ling Han hurriedly scurried off to one side. He had successfully stoked the fire, so it was naturally time for him to watch the show now. But just as he was watching with much interest, the panther paw man pointed the arrow straight at him. Brat, you are bouncing around a lot. No, just a little. Ling Han was very humble. Those who are weak are not qualified to stand on this platform. The panther paw man moved brazenly. The general atmosphere of the whole netherworld was far ruder and more unreasonable than in the immortal realm. They would come to blows at the slightest disagreement. Ling Han sighed. Stretching out the index and middle fingers of his right hand, he began to fight the other. He was using the lightning sword technique, but the lightning sword technique was based on speed, and combined with the power of lightning he had formed through observing heavenly tribulation. However, both these traits were established on the regulations of the immortal realm. Thus, its might that could be displayed was greatly weakened. Ling Han was indifferent. His opponent was only in the medium extreme of the Eternal River tier, so he could simply play around with him, and use him to increase his grasp of the regulations of the netherworld. The 9 big shots on the stone chairs only cast a look at him before withdrawing their attention. This kind of battle was absolutely not worth their attention, but the time for the treasure exchange was not here yet, so they did not stop them. In any case, were cultivators not produced through continuous battles? Go Li was indeed awesome. He had dealt with the snake-eyed man in over 100 moves, but the battle between Ling Han and the panther paw man was incredibly drawn out, and also extremely confusing to the spectators. It was clear that this guy did not have a high cultivation level. He only had slightly stronger power, and looked like he would quickly lose. But as it happened, he still managed to hang on continuously, which caused the spectators to click their tongues in amazement. Have you all realized that this guy's strength seems to be slightly stronger than when he had just started? Now that you're saying it, it seems like that really is the case. Everyone turned to look at each other, and couldn't help but look stunned. This was too bizarre. Although the majority of king tiers were the type to use battles to develop themselves, and their abilities would improve faster the more they fought, it was nothing as exaggerated as Ling Han was now. After a battle, no matter what, one should go into seclusion for a few months or even a few years, summarize their inadequacies in the battle, and improve on that basis. Naturally, one's abilities would improve slightly. But in Ling Han's case, whilst fighting, he was also improving on his own abilities. Just what kind of freak was this? This kind of natural talent at cultivation was practically nature-defying, Yet it was them that were thinking too much. Ling Han's cultivation level had been in the medium extreme of the Eternal River tier in the first place, but his grasp of the regulations in the netherworld was still maintained at the low extreme. Thus, the more of a grasp he had on the regulations of the netherworld, the further his abilities would naturally improve. Fighting with the Panther Man was a process for him to quickly grasp the regulations of the netherworld. But others did not know that. After half a day had passed, Ling Han could already manage a counter for every 10 moves compared to when he initially had to stay on complete defense. Then, it slowly became that he could counterattack for every 9 moves, then 8 moves, and he was becoming stronger and stronger. This caused even those big shots seated high up to raise an eyebrow. If this guy was allowed to continuously fight on like this, would he directly fight his way all the way up to the Demon Master tier? A day later, Ling Han was no longer at a disadvantage at all. The Panther poor man stopped in shock. If they continued fighting, Ling Han would surpass him in strength, and just the thought of this was enough to frighten him. Ling Han was discontented. "Why aren't you fighting anymore? Like hell, is there such a freak like you?" The Panther poor man did not answer, and directly sank into the crowd. He couldn't fight him, but could still avoid him, right? Go Li returned, looked at Ling Han, and then seriously stated, "You are really a strange guy. You are not ordinary, either." "Even I don't know how strong you are exactly," Ling Han retorted solemnly. "Filth King." But in the next instant, Go Li had dismissed all his seriousness. "Chicken thief." Ling Han was unwilling to be outdone, either. On a stone chair, a big shot said, "Cough, it's about time. Let's start exchanging treasures." He looked to be in his 30s, and was the oldest among all those gathered here. Thus, he was considered a person with good moral standing and reputation, and was host of the exchange this time round. "Everyone, take out your treasures in turn. Those who are interested can place a bid, and trade their own item for it. It is up to the treasure's owner to decide whom he wishes to trade with." This big shot's name was Guang Feichen, and was in the peak stage of the consummate level of the Eternal River tier. 100 million years ago, he had already reached the consummate level, but his corresponding age was only about 30 plus, so he could be claimed to be in the prime of his youth, his vitality high. "I was recommended by all to become host, so I shall get the ball rolling," he said smilingly. Spreading out his right hand, there was a completely crimson fruit in his palm. This is the red clear fish fruit, and can allow the cultivation level to be greatly boosted for Eternal River tiers. However, its effects are extremely violent. Unless there is a demon master standing by to suppress them, only those who have reached the consummate level of the Eternal River tier will be able to bear being barraged by its medicinal effects. When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but shake their heads. This requirement was really too high. Asking the help of a demon master? How many could accomplish that? Chapter 1547, Drawing Jealousy. Chapter 1547, Drawing Jealousy. This red clear fish fruit was really not very helpful. Those that were in true need of it did not dare eat it, and when their cultivation level reached the consummate level of the Eternal River tier, there was actually no further barrier ahead of them. If they cultivated a few tens of thousands to a few million years, they would definitely be capable of reaching the peak stage. Furthermore, when one reached that step, they would have to experience the regulations of heaven and earth. Otherwise, the number of stars could slowly be increased, but it was forever impossible for one to take the final, most crucial step and advance into the Genesis tier. Of course, if they had a demon master to support them, then that was really a true natural treasure. Those who need it, please take out a treasure to trade for it. After Guang Feichen said this, he closed his mouth, his eyes sweeping over the gathered masses. "I have a purple frost pill here, which can allow a person who cultivates an ice element cultivation technique to increase his battle prowess by a single star for a short period," someone spoke up. Guang Feichen shook his head. Firstly, he was not cultivating an ice element cultivation technique, and secondly, a natural treasure that directly increased one's cultivation level was far more valuable than a temporary burst of battle prowess. At least, only one pill was far from being enough. "I have an incomplete scroll of the life-crossing art here. Is Brother Guang satisfied with this?" Another person spoke up. A hint of shock appeared in Guang Feichen's expression, and he asked, "Which chapter is it?" "The middle chapter," the person answered. Guang Feichen shook his head again. "Unfortunately, I do not need the middle chapter." But this caused everyone else to whisper among themselves. The life-crossing art was very famous in the Netherworld, and was said to have been left behind by a demon master. However, it had been lost long ago, and the presently remaining incomplete chapters were also very hard to obtain. They could not possibly obtain a complete demon master technique now, but gathering all 3 incomplete chapters would still serve the purpose of study. This was very beneficial. "Brother Guang, I have a piece of level 13 godly metal here, would you mind trading?" another person spoke up. Guang Feichen still shook his head. He was already in the consummate level of the Eternal River tier. What need did he have for level 13 godly metal? Yet Ling Han took note of this person. Later, if the latter took out the level 13 godly metal to trade, he was determined to obtain it. He coughed and said, "Brother Guang, I have a cup of tea here. You can take a sip first." He drew out a teapot and directly extracted the water vapor from the air itself, turning it directly into a pot of water. Then, he drew out a reincarnation tree leaf and placed it inside. Channeling the 9 heavens flame, the pot of water immediately boiled, causing the medicinal effects of the reincarnation tree to be brought out fully. The aroma of the tea filled the air, and just the aroma would make one feel as if they were fitting in with the great Tao. This was a leaf of the reincarnation tree. Even in the celestial realm, it was an impressive treasure. However, because its growth was stimulated by the Black Tower, the effects naturally could not possibly compare to the ancient tree that had truly grown for 12 trillion years. Ling Han could not bear to hand over this whole pot of tea to Guang Feichen. Instead, he drew out a cup and poured a little. Then, he filled the cup to the brim with clear water, and only then did he push it towards Guang Feichen. The cup streaked between the two of them, passing a great many people on its course. All their eyes were bright, and they felt an urge to make a move to snatch the tea, but being wary of Guang Feichen's well-known reputation, they suppressed this urge forcefully. Guang Feichen accepted it. First, he took a sniff of the tea aroma, and then carefully did a sweep with his divine sense. Only after confirming that Ling Han had not tampered with it did he take a sip. Immediately, divine red clouds surged around his whole body, and it seemed as if his whole person had become abstract. This is compatibility with Tao. The other 8 big shots were all stunned, their eyes filled with envy. Compatibility with the Tao of heaven and earth was something that could only be accomplished by saints and demon masters, and if they could enter into that state, that meant that they had touched the doorstep that led to entering into the demon master tier. Though they would still be very, very far away, they at least would have a sliver of hope, and would no longer be groping around blindly. This tea was too awesome. It was only a single leaf, and had been diffused innumerable times. If they could taste it, would Genesis tier be far off from them? But they did not know that only drinking the reincarnation tea for the first time would have the best effects. In future, though it would still be helpful in comprehending Tao, it was definitely not as exaggerated as the first sip. After a very long time, Guang Feichen finally opened his eyes, and asked, "How many tea leaves are you trading?" Ling Han smiled slightly, and said, "Just this one pot." In other words, 1 tea leaf in exchange for a red clear fish fruit. If a great elite of the celestial realm was here, he would definitely slap Ling Han, and kill this spendthrift fool. This was practically extravagance to a terrifying extent. He was actually using a precious treasure among the celestial herbs to trade for a divine fruit. But Ling Han did not care the slightest bit. He had many reincarnation tree leaves. Furthermore, what was the use of guarding a mountain of treasure? The true path to power was using this mountain of treasure to strengthen his own abilities. Guang Feichen did not know that this was a leaf of the reincarnation tree. He paused for a while, and then answered, "All right, I accept the trade." The two of them waved their hands. One sent out the teapot, while the other sent the red clear fish fruit over, and completed the first trade of the treasure exchange this time round. "Next, we shall go by turns." Guang Feichen pointed randomly at one person. "We'll start from you." Various types of treasures were taken out one after another, but Ling Han was only interested in increasing his cultivation level and level 13 godly metal, or saintly material from level 17 and upwards, but it was obvious that no one could possibly take something like that out. That was saintly material. It was something that not even every saint might possess, so how could it possibly fall into their possession? An eternal river tear possessing saintly material might not be fortunate, but would instead draw a calamity onto himself. There were very few treasures that could increase cultivation level. It was possible that only big shots like Guang Feichen could possess one because it was useless even if he ingested it, so he could only use it in a trade. Others would definitely have used such treasures themselves. Ling Han completely did not fear becoming the target of others. As long as he thought it might be of some use, he would trade, and there were some cultivation techniques of the netherworld and pill recipes among those items he traded for. He would use reincarnation tree leaves to complete the trade. This was a treasure that no one could refuse. Thus, Ling Han also became the biggest winner in this treasure exchange, and it was unknown how many people were already targeting him. You were not a big shot, yet showed off such astonishing wealth. Wasn't that equivalent to announcing publicly that you wanted to be robbed? Hey, if you go on like this, even I, this brother Li, will not be able to restrain myself from robbing you. Go Li swallowed. The eyes he looked at Ling Han were the eyes of a glutton looking at a delicious feast. Ling Han smiled slightly. You can try, and we'll see who will be robbing whom. See, he was a man of such firm principles. He never took the initiative to trifle with others, but if others trifled with him, then that was really too bad. Why do I feel that you are even trickier than I am? Go Li scratched his head. Ling Han only smiled in response. The treasure exchange had not ended. He was also lacking only 3 pieces of level 13 godly metal before he could improve the divine demon sword further. He was not disappointed. Level 13 godly metal was not an incredibly valuable material here. Chapter 1548 A Demon Master's Daughter. 1548 A Demon Master's Daughter. Their CR was here. Ling Han and Go Li exchanged looks, and planned to slip away. Fairy Zhu, have these 2 people offended you? A big shot asked. Though he was only in the peak stage of the high extreme of the Eternal River tier, because he was a king tier, his battle prowess could be claimed to be extraordinary, and he could lay claim to the name of a big shot. His name was Bei Kai, and he did not belong to this galaxy. Fairy Zhu, I will get revenge for you. Let me. There were a considerable number of people calling out in the area, all of them seeming to be close friends of this young girl. A muscle twitched slightly in Ling Han's cheek, and he asked Go Li, Hey, whose chicken did you actually steal? This girl's background does not look to be very ordinary. How should I know? I immediately made a move when I saw the green treasure chicken, Go Li said very innocently. You, the 2 of you actually stole Fairy Zhu's green treasure chicken? Someone beside them heard their words, and was immediately scared into taking a few steps back, as if determined to draw a clear dividing line between them. Ling Han was confused, and asked, so what if he stole it? Who exactly is this girl? That's right, who is she? Go Li asked. Another person by the side shook his head, and asked, you 2 actually don't even know of Fairy Zhu, Xian? Is she very famous? Go Li murmured, and then his eyes suddenly became blank. Hiss. I remember the Overlord Sword Demon Master's surname is also Zhu, don't tell me. That's right, Fairy Zhu is precisely the only daughter of the Overlord Sword Demon Master. The man nodded. Fuck. Go Li's eyes involuntarily widened. He actually stole a chicken from the daughter of a demon master. Wasn't that practically issuing a challenge to the demon master? Ling Han grinned, and clapped a hand on Go Li's shoulder. Congratulations. You are about to be hunted down by a demon master. Get lost, aren't you the same as well? Don't forget, you also had a share of the chicken meat. Go Li jumped high into the air. With their explanation, those gathered also understood. No wonder Zhu Xian was so furious. As it turned out, these 2 had been so outrageously bold to actually steal and eat the chickens that she was raising. Everyone shook their heads. She was the daughter of a demon master. If you drew her ire, you had best pray for good luck. However, in any case, they had just stolen and ate a few chickens, so they simply had to offer a humble apology. Fairy Zhu was not a petty person. Humph, Kneel down and quickly apologize to Fairy Zhu. A young man stood up. Initially, Zhu Xian was noble and remote. Even if others wanted to curry her favor, they would not get the chance to. But this was a wonderful chance. If he could perform well in front of Zhu Xian, who knew, she might fall in love with him, right? Then wouldn't he become the son-in-law of a demon master? This was a great opportunity. None of your business, get lost. Go Li was not in a good mood, and waved off the man, appearing to be very irritated. Humph, you are really arrogant, no wonder you dared to steal from Fairy Zhu. The man moved brazenly and took the initiative to attack Go Li. He dared to step out, so he indeed had some abilities. His strength was not inferior to Go Li, so this wouldn't only be seeking his own humiliation. The two people fought fiercely, yet it was hard to decide who was stronger. They continued to be stuck in a stalemate. Bei Kai saw a sliver of impatience in Zhu Xian's expression, and thus said, Fairy Zhu, allow me to fight on your behalf, and give these two little thieves a little punishment. Zhu Xian nodded, not taking Bei Kai's move to ingratiate himself with her to heart. Because she was the daughter of a demon master, she was used to others currying favor with her all her life. Because she was not accustomed to it, she chose to live on her own. She had not thought that she had just moved out a few years, yet she would already be robbed. Her green treasure chickens were too pitiful. In the past, even her old man drooled at the sight of them, but because she had developed affection for them, she did not allow the demon master to take a single bite. But in the end, they ended up in the stomachs of two little thieves. Bei Kai moved, suppressing with a single palm strike. Both Go Li and his opponent paled in shock, and hurriedly separated, not daring to face this attack head-on. A king tier that had reached the peak stage of the high extreme of the Eternal River tier could be called a big shot. His battle prowess was incredibly frightening. His eyes focused on Go Li, and he attacked continuously. Because Go Li's abilities were clearly superior to Ling Han's, as long as Go Li was suppressed, Ling Han naturally would have no escape, either. Go Li roared out in anger. He, too, was a king tier, so he naturally was unwilling to be captured and humiliated. He showed his full battle prowess, and fought Bei Kai right up to the skies. But no matter how powerful he was, there was a gap of a whole minor level between the two of them. He was definitely no match for Bei Kai. In merely over a dozen moves, he was blasted down from the skies by a palm strike. Bang, he crashed into the platform on the mountaintop, and created a human-shaped pit in the platform. Ling Han walked over with a smile, and said, Chicken thief, you really don't look so good now. Filth King, don't you laugh now. Later, you'll be following in my footsteps. Go Li's physique was very strong, he actually still had the energy to speak, but his vitality had indeed greatly declined, and he appeared to be a bit weak and lacking strength. It's your turn. Bei Kai stood proudly in midair, pointing a finger right at Ling Han. Ling Han crooked his finger at him. I should give you prior warning. Later, if I thrash you, you had better not break out in tears. Ha! Bei Kai smirked coldly, a hint of displeasure leaking into his expression. He especially despised those who liked to talk big. He did not say anything else, and stretched out his hand to grab Ling Han. In his opinion, he would naturally be easily grabbed with a single move. Ling Han used his index and middle fingers like a sword, and swiped out at that giant hand. Wong, under the pressure of a big shot, Ling Han suddenly looked strained. However, even if the other was a big shot, the peak stage of the high extreme of the Eternal River tier was still a little inferior, and was not enough to shake his physique. The palm strike landed, and Bei Kai couldn't help but lightly exclaim in surprise. Though he had not used his full power in this strike, the other party had dispersed it a little too easily, hadn't he? The others were also surprised. Bei Kai actually did not manage to apprehend Ling Han in a single move. This was extremely inconceivable. It should be known that Bei Kai was known as a big shot. Yet Ling Han shook his head internally. Bei Kai was indeed not weak, but compared to the big shots of the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy, he was lacking. At most, he could only be considered a rank 1 king tier. Apparently, in different places, what the moniker of Big Shot represented was also vastly different. With a battle cry, he took the initiative to approach Bei Kai, and began a furious battle with the latter. This was an acceptable opponent. Compared to the man previously, he was considerably stronger, and could allow him to acquire a better grasp of the regulations of the netherworld. He was studying for practical application. His cultivation level was already there, and he also had the support of the demonic power source, so there was no problem at all. At the beginning, it was naturally Bei Kai who was completely suppressing Ling Han, and Ling Han could only manage to parry his attacks. In fact, he was being beaten repeatedly. However, because his physique was too strong, these attacks were completely superficial when they landed on him. However, Ling Han gradually became capable of fighting back. At first, he could only counterattack once per 100 moves, then he could counterattack once per 90-odd moves, and then it became 80-odd moves. The speed at which he improved was astonishing, and everyone could tell that with a single look. This freak. Even the big shots were emotionally stirred. This natural talent was definitely nature-defying. Bei Kai was both shocked and embarrassed. He had not thought that Ling Han's toughness and flexibility would be so strong. He was really getting stronger the more he was attacked. However, he was an honorable big shot, and yet he actually could not manage to apprehend a piece of trash who was only in the low extreme. How would he be able to face others in future? He humphed coldly, and finally delivered a fatal move. His hands formed seals, and he raised them high like a treasure bottle, pressing them down on Ling Han. Life and death are both my decision, treasure bottle seal, he called out harshly, blazing light surging from his whole body. Chapter 1549 Regulations of the Two Realms. Chapter 1549 Regulations of the Two Realms. The treasure bottle glowed, and pressed down on Ling Han, filled with frightening destructive power. The regulations of the netherworld were inclined towards death and destruction in the first place. Ling Han raised his hand casually to parry the attack, yet his mind was presently experiencing the regulations of the netherworld. He had a kind of awareness that if he could simultaneously grasp the regulations of both the netherworld and the immortal realm, his battle prowess would be massively increased. This was like yin and yang. Whichever was lacking, it would be incomplete, and once it was completed, the improvement of one's might was definitely not as ordinary as merely doubling it. However, doing it was far from being as simple as saying it. Ling Han discovered that he was forgetting the regulations of the immortal realm. The regulations that were already grasped could actually be forgotten? No, it was not that Ling Han was forgetting them, but rather that the heaven and earth of the netherworld was wearing away at the regulations of the immortal realm he had grasped. Being complete opposites to each other, they were completely incompatible, and could not coexist at all. Thus, if one wanted to stay in the netherworld, his regulations of the immortal realm would have to be erased. However, in the Black Tower, this kind of situation did not appear. Ling Han only realized suddenly that the regulations of the immortal realm he had grasped were being worn away in these last few days. No wonder there had not been any saint that managed to ascend into the celestial realm for so long. That was because the heaven and earth themselves did not allow it. Yet Ling Han still had a sliver of hope. Because he had the Black Tower could extract the regulations of the two realms for Ling Han to study, but it was not affected by any regulations by itself, or it should be said that it was only affected by the regulations of the Black Tower itself, and that was inside the Black Tower, where it was the most powerful. Thus, it could easily suppress the regulations of the two realms, so they could be studied yet would not be hostile towards each other. In that case, these two sets of regulations actually could coexist. Ling Han sank into deep thought. Bang, bang, bang. In that moment of distraction, he was instantly blasted solidly by the treasure bottle. Then, his astonishing physique showed its might. He was only bounced back and forth like a pellet, but to wound him, it was difficult. Presently, only battle prowess on the level of the consummate level of the Eternal River tier could barely wound Ling Han, and they would have to use regulations as support and slowly refine him. One was dreaming if he wanted to use pure force to penetrate Ling Han's defenses. The current Ling Han only feared a saint. Bei Kai was almost going crazy. He could clearly sense that Ling Han had been distracted. No, it was nothing as simple as being distracted, he was practically allowing his thoughts to wander, and did not take him seriously at all. It was as if he was comprehending some kind of cultivation technique. Right, That was how arrogant he was being. Just how much were you looking down on me? You actually dared to be so distracted when you were fighting me? Beikai roared in fury. This time, he was really angered. It was not as simple as getting revenge on behalf of Zhu Xian anymore. Instead, a strong dislike had risen up in him against Ling Han. Even if he didn't kill the latter, he would at least have to leave behind a deeply ingrained lesson for him. Using his full battle prowess, his furious attacks were all poured out on Ling Han. The battle prowess of a king tier using his full might was really frightening, and those who were watching were all incredibly stunned. Even Zhu Xian was slightly surprised. This battle prowess was really impressive. However, what caused them to be even more speechless was Ling Han. Though he was being blasted back and forth, he still did not have the slightest injury on him. That unperturbed look was practically driving them crazy. Thankfully, I did not start a fight with this filth king. He's a fuck freak, Go Li mumbled. He barely crawled out of the stone hole. I come from the wild, and not only do I possess the bloodline of 3 primitive beasts, I have bathed in the blood of many beasts since childhood, so my physique is incredibly strong, but compared to him, I might as well be made of tofu. I'm about to go crazy. Just what level of defense is that? Someone exclaimed in shock, grabbing their head. Definitely a freakish level. The others shook their heads. Those who had previously thought of robbing Ling Han obediently dismissed this idiotic idea. Yet Ling Han's mind was really wandering away. Since the 2 types of regulations could coexist, why couldn't they be merged? It was said that one could only break through to the celestial realm by grasping the regulations of the 2 realms. If so, wouldn't fusing them together be even better? This thought flashed in his mind, and he could no longer control it. He tried to merge the simplest regulations, beginning from the mountain river tier. Cultivators were both cultivating origin power and regulations, so the regulations they could grasp at the mountain river tier were also the simplest and easiest. With Ling Han's level now, he could easily analyze them. But while they were simple, it was a dead end if he wanted to merge the simplest regulations of the 2 realms. One was black while the other was white, one was water and the other was fire. So how was he supposed to merge them together? They were complete opposites. One represented destruction, and the other represented creation. In their essence, they were completely contrary to each other. If they were fused together, they would definitely be out of place. What might would they still have? Yet Ling Han had stubbornness that would cause him to go down a dead end. How could he give up so easily? He tried out various methods, and continuously allowed his thoughts to fly. This might be a path that had never been walked by others before, so how could it be easily done? After a whole day and night had passed, Beikai was starting to become afraid. He had used all the secret techniques that he could use, and had even used a few super powerful moves, the kind that needed a long time to accumulate energy. Ling Han did not react at all, so he naturally did not have to worry about being interrupted. Still, there were no effects at all, and this human in front of him seemed to possess an indestructible body. He was about to cry already. He had never attacked as much as he liked in battle like this, yet he was getting more and more panicky on the inside. Finally, he stopped, looked guiltily at Zhu Xian, and then said, "Fairy Zhu, my skill is not proficient enough, I have disappointed you." No one was jeering at him. It was not that Beikai was not strong enough, but rather that Ling Han was really too freakish. They had never seen anyone that could cultivate their physique to this terrifying extent. Meanwhile, Zhu Xian nodded her head, and though the gaze she directed at Ling Han was still filled with hatred, there was also a bit of curiosity in her gaze. Even the daughter of a demon master like herself was emotionally stirred by this kind of physique, and her interest was piqued. Naturally, the look in her eyes had been noticed by a great many people, and they couldn't help but feel resentment secretly. This was too dangerous. If a woman became curious about a man, that meant that it was highly possible that she would fall in love with him. She was the daughter of a demon master, the goddess in all of their hearts. They dreamt of obtaining her hand in marriage even in their sleep. Everyone was filled with so much resentment that they wanted to take a few bites out of Ling Han, but this was only limited to their own thoughts. If they really did take a few bites out of him, that would probably lead to them breaking their teeth off in the process. Inside the Black Tower, Small Tower solidified its form, and trembled slightly. This brat actually realized that the regulations of the two realms can be merged. Not bad, not bad. I thought that I would have to point it out to him when he reached the saint tier. Fine then, I'll give him a helping hand. No matter what, he is still my master. This proud tower said thus. It stimulated the reincarnation tree to burst in might inside Ling Han's body. In the outside world, time passed as usual, but to Ling Han's mind, it was as if he had left his physical body and entered another world where time was endlessly slowed down. A clear awareness rose up in Ling Han's heart, but he couldn't grasp it no matter how much he tried. It was clearly right in front of him, yet seemed very far from his grasp, making him feel like he was about to go crazy. He was chasing it all the way like that, his divine sense flying away endlessly, and entering the deepest level of meditation. After an unknown period of time passed, his body suddenly trembled. Couldn't he just rip a tear into space and directly reach it? Why did he have to chase from behind so dumbly? With this thought, everything suddenly became clear to him. Who said that creation and destruction could not coexist? Wasn't everything in the world created? But it would eventually be destroyed, and destruction was not eternal, either. Sooner or later, a new world would be reborn from destruction. Chapter 1550 Fusing the Regulations, the light of Tao appears again. 1550 Fusing the Regulations, the light of Tao appears again. It could be fused, but it was not a simple merging and forcibly squeezing them together, but was a loop. Ling Han thought of all the living things of the heaven and earth. Plants grew, and would be eaten by cattle and sheep. For plants, this was destruction, but for cattle and sheep, this was the continuation of life. And livestock would also encounter the attacks of fierce beasts like wolves and tigers. The death of cattle and sheep then represented the continuation of life for wolves and tigers. Life and death, destruction and creation. Ling Han's enlightenment continued. Wang, his body began to glow. Pu. When those around him saw this, they all spluttered, all of them watching with open-mouthed shock. Light of Tao. This is the fuck *** light of Tao. Fuck. They were about to go crazy. Was there such a freak? Being continuously beaten, he actually went on to comprehend Tao. Moreover, he actually succeeded, gained the approval of the heavens, and received a boost from the light of Tao. This was approval from the heaven and earth. Ordinarily, only those who had created a completely new technique would gain the approval of the heavens, and the light of Tao would descend on them. This was not something as simple as being approved of, it also had great benefits. The approval of the heaven and earth by itself was a kind of reward. Envy. Jealousy. Zhu Xian's eyes shone even brighter. At this moment, she completely did not think that Ling Han was a chicken thief. How could an extraordinary genius that could gain the approval of the heaven and earth be a pilfering thief? What a joke! It must all have been the fault of that Go Li. Ling Han was the one who had appeared in the wrong place at the wrong time. No, he should have appeared at the right place at the right time. Otherwise, how could she have met him? Zhu Xian couldn't help but blush rosily, looking very beautiful and alluring. Oh no! When those gathered saw this scene, they were all sighing sorrowfully on the inside. This was obviously the show of a maiden who had fallen in love. Sigh, a wonderful goddess was one just like that. Ling Han sat down in a cross-legged position without being aware of it. The enlightenment of creation and destruction not being opposites to each other was only the beginning, allowing him to know how to fuse the regulations of the two realms, but how exactly it was to be known would still have to be done through practice, and there was much difficulty ahead. But the hardest step was already resolved. Next, it was only a matter of time, and with the reincarnation tree, Ling Han really did not lack time. He suddenly opened his eyes. Xiao, all the light of Tao actually sank into his eyes, making his eyes seem as if they had endless depth, and one would very easily lose themselves as they gazed into his eyes. That was the light of Tao. Ling Han's eyes swept over the scene, and he couldn't help but be surprised. He had clearly comprehended Tao for at least a few hundred years, yet why did everything here seem like it was just yesterday? He had not entered into the Black Tower. Hold on. A thought flashed in his mind, and he asked, Small Tower, was it your doing? I was in a good mood, so I helped you a bit. No need to thank me, I am still regretting it. Small Tower immediately retorted proudly. Fuck, this guy really had a tough mouth. It was clearly helping, yet could still infuriate him to the extreme. Ling Han ignored this proud tower, and his eyes focused on Bei Kai instead. With a smile, he said, "Apologies, I was distracted just now. Come, let's continue the battle." To hell with continuing the battle. Bei Kai shook his head repeatedly. Ling Han's battle prowess was definitely not weak, but his physique was strong to an irresolvable extent. Fighting with him would only depress him, and cause him to doubt himself. Ling Han ignored his refusal, and rushed out directly, shooting out a fist in a fierce punch. What a joke. Just now, if I had said I did not want to fight, would you have stopped? Since that was the case, why should I be concerned about your opinion? Bei Kai had no choice, and could only fight back. But he had never imagined that Ling Han's battle prowess would actually soar to an inconceivable height all of a sudden. Previously, he could already counter once for every few dozen moves, but what was this now called? He was no match for even a Sun-Moon tier. No, not just a Sun-Moon tier, even Mountain River tiers that were in a slightly higher level would be stronger than him. You dare humiliate me thus? Bei Kai was furious. It was one matter for me to be unable to harm you, but you were using such fancy, impractical skills to fight me. Just how far were you looking down on me? You could kill a man, but should not humiliate him, what more when he was a king tier? How dare you? He attacked madly, his fury rising to the point of madness. In truth, Ling Han did not really mean to humiliate him. It was because he was presently channeling the regulations of the two realms, and was in anxious need to test them out in battle so he could stabilize and improve on them further. Because he had merely fused a little bit of the regulations of the Mountain River tier, this naturally did not have very much power. Yet Ling Han was pleasantly surprised. After fusing the regulations of the two realms, the power had been increased tenfold. This also meant that once he completely fused the regulations of the two realms, merely that would allow him to be stronger than other king tiers by a whole star of battle prowess. They were all king tiers, so could this difference of a star of battle prowess be overlooked? Moreover, after fusing the regulations of the two realms, this new set of regulations would no longer be worn away by the heaven and earth of the netherworld, because it also contained the regulations of the netherworld, or they would naturally be erasing themselves. Similarly, even if Ling Han returned to the immortal realm, the heaven and earth of the immortal realm would obviously not erase this new set of regulations, either. This was the correct path. Ling Han laughed loudly, exploding in a burst of his full battle prowess, which he blasted at Bei Kai. Everyone was struck speechless. If one were to claim that Ling Han had been deliberately pretending, he really did not look like he had been putting on an act. But if one was to claim that he only had that little bit of battle prowess, then all those in the Eternal River tier could directly go and commit suicide. An extreme of strength and weakness appeared in the same person. Furthermore, the two extremes were actually harmonious with each other. This was really incomprehensible and unimaginable. However, Ling Han was continuously becoming stronger. After all, it was only the regulations of the Mountain River tier. The level he was at now was too high, he merely had to spend a little more time, and he would be able to fuse these regulations together. Most importantly, with the support of the reincarnation tree, his thoughts were racing on a higher level. The Mountain River tier, Sun Moon tier, Heavenly Body tier. Everyone was witnessing with their own eyes how Ling Han's battle prowess was endlessly becoming stronger, which struck them speechless. Ling Han must have been playing with Bei Kai. You fuck just drew out the light of Tao, so you must have cultivated an inconceivably great mystical power. How could you possibly have been that weak? Only Ling Han himself was aware that he had indeed not been playing around with Bei Kai. Instead, he had treated the latter like a sparring partner. Otherwise, without testing it out in true battle, he could not possibly have improved so quickly. In the end, his battle prowess had once again entered into the Eternal River tier, but after he reached this level, Ling Han could not advance further. That was because he had only grasped so much of the regulations of the netherworld, and no longer had any way to fuse them with the regulations of the immortal realm. Too bad, too bad. Ling Han sighed. He flicked his right index finger, and the limitless 9 deaths formation activated. However, It only released a sliver of its might. Suddenly, Beikai shouted in pain, and he was sent flying, a very long wound left behind on his chest. Though he was a king tier, he was no match for 11 limitless 9 deaths formations. Even if it was a sliver of its might, he would still be wounded. If it had been its full might, then he would definitely be killed in an instant. So powerful. Previously, everyone had some dissent, but when they saw this scene, nobody else said anything. The strongest would be kings. Moreover, Ling Han had not provoked Beikai. It was Beikai who had taken the initiative to challenge him, so he naturally should bear the consequences. What elite would still be even-tempered after being provoked by others? However, even Beikai had lost. Was there anyone else here that could match Ling Han? Everyone turned to look at Guang Feichen. Though he was not the only king tier here, firstly, he was in the peak stage of the consummate level of the Eternal River tier, and could be considered the strongest below saints, and secondly, he had been immersed in this cultivation level for an unknown number of years, so his abilities must have been polished to an incredibly powerful extent. Guang Feichen only acted as if he had not seen their looks. He did not have the slightest bit of confidence, so he was naturally unwilling to damage his own reputation. Chapter 1551 Son of a Demon Master. 1551 Son of a Demon Master. Xiu. Right at this moment, a majestic light suddenly shot over from afar. Peng, a massive sound rang out from the mountain peak. That came from the majestic light crashing onto the mountain. As the light dispersed, a youth was presently standing proudly there. His face was handsome, yet he had a pair of silver cat's ears, which was quite adorable. Some men whose sexual inclinations were not that firm would probably be completely bent at the sight of him. How dare you? Immediately, a few people shouted in rebuke. How could he ignore the rules like this? Could it be that just anyone could simply come up here like this? Those that could stand here had all used their abilities to prove that they were worthy. This youth definitely did not have that kind of qualification, because he was only in the heavenly body tier. Get lost. Those few people immediately moved. Ha! A light exclamation, and peng, 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 human figures were sent flying. It was those people that had made a move that were sent flying, like flowers being scattered by a celestial maiden. Another person appeared. This person had a slender, tall figure and a head of silver locks. The eyes were also silver, releasing a bewitching charm. This was a person whose gender was difficult to distinguish. Wearing loose white robes, the figure was not clearly seen, and the facial features were also incredibly neutral. Mo Li. When they saw this person, a considerable number of people exclaimed in trembling voices. If one were to ask whether it was the Overlord Sword Demon Master stronger or the Hysteria Demon Master stronger in the Aurora Galaxy, that was something that had never been concluded, because the two great Demon Masters had sparred for who knew how many rounds, yet it always ended in a tie. But in the Eternal River tier, if Mo Li claimed to be second, there would definitely be no one who dared say he was first. He was a publicly acknowledged young king tier invincible in the Eternal River tier, and he had an above 30% chance of advancing into the Genesis tier. Don't think that 30% chance was too small. In truth, not one person among those in the consummate level of the Eternal River tier dared to say that they had a certain chance of becoming a demon master. Mo Li's superior talent and strong abilities were evidently extraordinary. And he also had another identity, the personal disciple of the Hysteria Demon Master. It was not strange for him to come here. After a few more days, the Overlord Sword Demon Master would be sparring with the Hysteria Demon Master. As the personal disciple of the latter, wasn't it very normal for him to come along? Moreover, observing the battle between Demon Masters was also greatly beneficial for his breaking through to the Genesis tier. Ling Han's eyes tensed. This Mo Li made him feel a very strong pressure. He was definitely not weaker than big shots like Ren Feiyun and Cai Miao. In fact, it was even possible that he was slightly stronger than them. But what he was more curious about was whether this Mo Li was male or female. This was probably a matter that a great many people were curious about because Mo Li had never clearly confirmed his or her gender. The cat-eared youth walked over and smiled at Mo Li. Then, he looked at Zhu Xian and said, "So you are the Overlord Sword Demon Master's daughter, Zhu Xian?" Zhu Xian glanced at Mo Li, and then nodded, and answered, "That's right, who are you?" "My name is Wu Ju, and my father is the Hysteria Demon Master," the cat-eared youth replied. Everyone suddenly gave an "oh." No wonder Mo Li had moved, this was his junior brother. Zhu Xian wrinkled her nose in a frown. She very much disliked the arrogance of this youth. "The reason why I have come is to see how my betrothed looks like. If she looks ugly, I will definitely not marry her." Wu Ju looked Zhu Xian over from top to bottom. "Looks okay, but seems like the waist is a little wide." Those last words were directed to Mo Li. Mo Li's expression was wooden, and he answered, "It's not her waist that is wide, but her behind is too small, which is why her waist has lost its curve." His voice was also extremely neutral, and one was still unable to distinguish his gender from his voice. Pu. A great many people spluttered in laughter. Though this Mo Li's behavior was cold, his words were really enough to cause someone to die in fury. Zhu Xian's pretty face was already bright red in embarrassment. Her right hand tightly gripped her sword. She wanted to commit murder. Wu Ju meanwhile nodded his head, and said, "I see. Mo Li was very sure. The two of you, have you said enough?" Zhu Xian squeezed out through gritted teeth, a vein popping on her hand that was gripping tightly onto her sword. "Barely adequate." Wu Ju's mouth twitched, and then said, "Then you. I will just tolerate recognizing you as my betrothed." Absolute nonsense. Zhu Xian took a look at Ling Han, and as if fearing that he would misunderstand, she hurriedly exclaimed, "Who is your betrothed here?" "Your father made a bet and lost to my father, and the stake was you," Wu Ju said. He spread out his hands, and sighed. "Sigh, really, I am so free and happy being on my own, so why did he have to find a betrothed for me?" "Lost a bet?" Zhu Xian's heart clenched, and she exclaimed, "Stop babbling nonsense, how could my father possibly lose to Lord Hysteria?" Mo Li interrupted, and said, "The wager hasn't begun yet. It will only be decided tomorrow when the two lords spar." Zhu Xian's heart suddenly calmed down. The two demon masters had to be using the battle's victor to decide the matrimony between her and Wu Ju, but obviously her father could not possibly lose. She humphed, and proudly declared, "In your dreams." Yet Mo Li said, "Junior sister Zhu, Lord Overlord Sword wagered that he could defeat my master this time. If not, he would betroth junior sister Zhu to my junior brother." Obviously, this is already a decided matter. Clearly, it was practically an impossible feat for Overlord Sword Demon Master to defeat Hysteria Demon Master, but it was also the same for the latter to defeat the former. Zhu Xian suddenly paled. Her father was really too self-confident this time round. He was so confident that he was going to drag her into the bargain. Wu Ju gave a yawn, and looked towards Ling Han. Previously, he had seen Zhu Xian casting a few looks at Ling Han. At first, he did not have to be concerned about that, but who asked this girl to have become his betrothed? He involuntarily stared at Ling Han, and after studying him for a while, he said, "You look a little familiar." Ling Han paused. He had never come to the Netherworld, so how could he possibly meet the son of a demon master? He smiled calmly, and said, "When have we met before?" It is this smile, especially asking to be beaten, especially detestable. I definitely have seen this smile before. Wu Ju pointed at Ling Han, looking as if someone had stepped on his tail. A muscle involuntarily twitched in Ling Han's cheek. Being able to say such words, he clearly was very familiar with him. Strange, he really had never seen this youth before. How did he cause the latter to be fuming with rage like this? Right, he had eaten one of the chickens of a demon master's daughter, and now had become the target of the son of another demon master. Was he really that unfortunate? "It's you. It's you." Wu Ju suddenly leaped up, and took a quick step forwards, his fist crashing down on Ling Han. So inexplicable. Ling Han gave a light shove, and swept Wu Ju backwards. Smiling, he said, "Kid, you are no match for me. Your senior brother would be a better match." Wu Ju had been too excited, so he had rushed forwards in a moment of impulse. Moreover, with Mo Li standing behind him, he was naturally unafraid. He hurriedly turned around, and declared, "Mo Li, get revenge for me." "What did he do to you?" Mo Li asked calmly, having no apparent ire. Wu Ju's face suddenly flushed, looking completely like a little wife that had been terribly bullied, yet he was reluctant to say anything. It was Ling Han who became anxious instead, and he exclaimed, "Hey, hey, hey, can't you speak nicely? This look of yours would make others misunderstand that I did something to you." Chapter 1552, Are you male or female? Chapter 1552, Are you male or female? Yet Wu Ju simply ignored him, and exclaimed, "Mo Li, get revenge for me, help me get revenge." He was acting like a spoiled child. The sight caused Ju Xian even more displeasure. This guy was practically just a kid, so how could he possibly become her husband? Mo Li nodded, and replied, "All right." Mo Li was going to make a move. Everyone couldn't help but be curious and excited. How many years had it been? Mo Li was famous like the brightest star in the skies. Since a long time ago, there was already no one that dared to challenge him, yet Ling Han previously had also displayed a frightening physique. Would he be able to endure Mo Li's attacks? They were all curious. "I will make 3 moves, Mo Li said to Ling Han, his expression calm. Ling Han smiled, and said, "No way, we have no animosity between the two of us, and we're about to fight a life-and-death battle already." A great many people immediately shook their heads. That was Mo Li, and he would be the only one beating others to death who would dare oppose him. Long ago, millions of years ago, there already existed this kind of legend. As long as one could take a single move from Mo Li, then he would be capable of doing as he liked among the eternal river tiers. Taking 3 moves practically would qualify one to rule over the eternal river tier. If it was 10 moves, then one would be a big shot among big shots. 3 moves. You couldn't. Mo Li was neither angered nor irritated, and again emphasized, 3 moves. Fine then, I'll play with you. Ling Han thought for a moment, his interest in gossip suddenly blazing. Involuntarily, he said, "Then, let's make a wager. If I can't take 3 moves from you, whether you want to beat me or kill me, I will have no disagreement. However, if I can take 3 moves, it will naturally be your loss. You'll have to tell me whether you are male or female." Gasp. Hearing that Ling Han actually still dared to bargain, everyone inhaled sharply, seeming to be incredibly stunned. That was Mo Li, the top elite of the Eternal River tier. If he was willing to confirm his gender, what need was there for you to ask? Obviously, he was not. And you actually went to touch on his weakness. Wasn't that just courting death? Mo Li still had a wooden expression, his figure rising into the skies. "Come fight me. Filth King Ling, rest assured and go. If you die, Brother Li will collect your corpse." Go Li was already capable of movement. With a strong physique, his speed of recovery was considerably astonishing. Scram! Ling Han almost shot out a foot to kick him. He rose into the air, and stood on the same level as Mo Li, facing him directly. The first move. Mo Li stretched out his right hand, and pressed it towards Ling Han. The light of fighting spirits suddenly sparked in Ling Han's eyes. This was a very strong opponent, and was stronger than even such big shots like Ren Feiyun. It was highly possible that he was a rank 3 king tier. This kind of king tier was really too rare, and that was why he naturally could be praised as a grand figure in this galaxy. In the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy, which of the disciples were not well-known figures in their own respective areas? They were existences that were ranked in the top 10, at the very least. Then let's test out the battle prowess of the top king tier in the Netherworld. Ling Han channeled the limitless 9 Deaths formation. Boom! His whole person suddenly exploded with a boundless violent chi. The limitless 9 Deaths formation was a killing formation in the first place, and ranked as the top among level 16 formations. 11 killing formations activating at the same time. What kind of concept was that? Ling Han moved, but did not use their full power. Instead, he only showed 30% of their might. That dense killing intent was practically enough to freeze one solid. Only Bei Kai had some awareness of it. When he had been sent flying by Ling Han's final blow, he had felt this kind of dense killing intent, which almost froze his blood into clotting. Now, his body involuntarily shivered with lingering fear. That expression on Mo Li's face that seemed like it would not change for 10,000 years also changed. Though it was only a bare twitch of his lips, that was a real change. With a shout, boom, his whole head of silver locks flew behind him, a silvery river appearing in midair, covered densely with great stars. Gods! Someone swept an eye over it, and involuntarily paled in shock. Mo Li's stars have actually exceeded 1 million. What? The others were also stunned speechless. Attaining as many as 1 million stars meant that he had reached the peak stage of the Eternal River tier, and could attempt breaking through to the Genesis tier. However, Genesis tier was difficult to reach. Some freakish king tiers could continue pushing forward in the Eternal River tier, and break the limit of 1 million stars. This could allow them to continue increasing their power. However, their grasp of the regulations of the heaven and earth would stagnate, and they ultimately could not be called saints. But how could it possibly be easy to break through the number of 1 million stars? As expected of Mo Li, he was too strong, but what was more inconceivable was that Mo Li actually channeled the silvery river. Just what kind of terrifying pressure had he encountered here? In other words, just how strong was Ling Han to actually manage to force Mo Li to this extent? Hong, Ling Han shot out his fist violently, as if it was capable of causing the skies to collapse and leveling the underworld. Break! Mo Li exclaimed lightly, brandishing his palm to meet Ling Han's blow. Silvery light danced, similarly raising into the skies. Peng! The two of them exchanged a blow, and both were sent flying backwards. Mo Li's face that had been astonishingly pale became even slightly paler in an inconceivable manner, yet Ling Han was completely indifferent. His physique was too strong. What effect could a mere rebound have on him? Immediately, he halted his retreat. Then, recomposing himself, he charged out at Mo Li again. This time, he had increased the might of the limitless 9 Deaths formation to 70%. Mo Li gritted his teeth, and boldly stepped forwards. Peng! The two of them once again bounced back. Mo Li was really very strong, and was not at a disadvantage at all, though his face became slightly paler again. Ling Han made a comeback. This time, he held nothing back. He channeled all 11 killing formations, blasting them madly at Mo Li. Peng! 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 2 great king tiers fighting caused even the skies to darken, and only an endless thunder was echoing in the area. Mo Li was really very powerful. He actually could hold up against 11 limitless 9 Deaths formations. However, thinking about it seriously, this was normal. His stars had already exceeded 1 million, and theoretically, he could be claimed to be in the pinnacle level of the Eternal River tier, becoming a demon in a different sense of the word. Having the power of a demon master, yet his grasp of regulations was slightly weaker. But Mo Li's strength was known to all. He was publicly acknowledged as the top in the Eternal River tier, yet Ling Han actually managed to fight him to a tie. No, he was in fact taking the initiative to attack, and suppressing Mo Li in battle. This was really something that was difficult to accept. Wasn't it Mo Li who said that he would let Ling Han have an allowance of 3 moves? Why were the tables now turned? It seemed like it was Ling Han that was testing Mo Li. Ling Han had long forgotten their agreement of 3 moves. He was already excited by battle, and cared about nothing else. Fight, fight, fight. This battle caused even the sun and moon to pale. Neither of the 2 great king tiers had a habit of admitting defeat. However, when it was the second day, they both stopped. That was because a more frightening shockwave was coming from the galaxy. The 2 demon masters had already begun their spar. Ling Han stared at the galaxy. The 2 demon masters were really too dazzling. Chapter 1553, Go Li's Regard. Chapter 1553, Go Li's Regard. Mo Li, this person with a wooden face, was actually female. She did not have the slightest bit of femininity. However, on the other hand, she did not have any bit of masculinity, either. If she said she was male, Ling Han would definitely think that she was lacking manliness, and was too effeminate. No way. Wu Ju jumped up, pointed at Ling Han, and exclaimed, "How could you possibly be this strong? Previously, you had only just broken through to the heavenly body tier, so how could you have become this strong in just over 100 years? Ling Han was shocked. You saw me over 100 years ago. Why don't I have the slightest recollection of you? Wu Ju humphed, yet was unwilling to speak of the situation at the time. Ling Han thought for a moment. That should have been on Cloud Apex Planet because Joint Peace Planet did not have the two-realm battlefield. Otherwise, if he had met a being of the Netherworld at some other place, he would definitely have a very deep impression of it. However, there were too many beings of the Netherworld at the two-realm battlefield, so how could he possibly remember whom he had met before? Forget it, he had even killed a saint already, so what need was there for him to be at such a loss about the son of a demon master? With this thought, Ling Han also let the matter go, and no longer continued to think of where he had once met Wu Ju. Furthermore, though Wu Ju had a big beef with him, it was obviously not the kind of overflowing hatred that wanted him to be dead. Otherwise, he only had to expose the fact that Ling Han was a cultivator from the immortal realm. The words of the son of a demon master naturally had weight, and that would definitely bring massive trouble for Ling Han. The two demon masters fought fiercely. This was the battle of the strongest of the Netherworld and immortal realms, and it continued until the skies darkened. Though Mo Li already possessed the power of the Genesis tier, her battle prowess was far from that level, and she could not be mentioned on equal terms with them at all. This battle did not continue for too long. After merely 10 days, the two demon masters stopped. It was another tie. However, the Overlord Sword Demon Master had lost his wager. He had betted on winning this battle. Zhu Xian left in a rush. She wanted to find her old man. Just fight if you wanted, but why was it that she became the stake in a bet between the two of them? If he was so intent on marriage, then he could go ahead and get married himself. Ling Han also planned to slip away quietly. He had gained a lot this time, and planned to enter into seclusion as soon as he returned. Firstly, he had to directly upgrade the Divine Demon Sword to Saint tier, and secondly, he had to comprehend the regulations of the Netherworld so that his grasp would catch up with his cultivation level. Then, he would once again merge the regulations of the two realms, and his battle prowess would increase to another level. Though using himself as a formation would allow him to have battle prowess that far exceeded his cultivation level, this was not a path that he wished to take. The path that he was determined to walk on was to strengthen himself. Hey, don't go. Yet Wu Ju hailed him down. He was obviously not all that interested in his betrothed, and did not stop Zhu Xian from leaving at all. However, he had great interest in Ling Han. What is it? Ling Han asked with a smile. I want to get revenge. Wu Ju raised his head high, appearing to be very infuriated. Just what exactly did I do to you? Ling Han was speechless. Had he really bullied this little boy before? You come with me, and when my abilities catch up to you, I will personally defeat you. Wu Ju exclaimed very foolishly and naively. Ling Han laughed loudly, and pressed a hand on his head. Young man, you have to be down to earth in life. Don't think of unrealistic things. Wu Ju shouted in anger, just how much were you looking down on me? Waving both his arms, he wanted to hit Ling Han, but with Ling Han pressing down on his head, this was completely wasted effort. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't touch Ling Han at all. Mo Li, tell me, will I be able to defeat him in future? He asked for Mo Li's help. Mo Li thought the matter over seriously, and answered, impossible. Wu Ju was stunned, and then felt so aggrieved he almost broke into tears. Are you really on my side? Why are you siding with an outsider? This is the truth, Mo Li emphasized again. That was what her personality was like. Wu Ju was struck speechless. Only after a while did he say, I don't believe it, I definitely want to defeat this guy. Ling Han, do you dare to come with me? He was spurring him on. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then replied, fine. Firstly, he did not have any kind of goal in the Netherworld, and secondly, Mo Li was a very good opponent, and could be used to temper him. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Wu Ju immediately became excited again. Filth King Ling, let's meet again in future, Go Li said, a strange grin on his face. Ling Han involuntarily shivered. A savage man that was 7 feet tall actually wore that kind of smile. There was definitely something off. Go Li waved his hand and marched off. He arrived at a spot where there was no one else, and drew out a conch-like item. It was made of jade and was very beautifully crafted, but he had not taken it out to play with it. Instead, He inserted his origin power into it with a very serious expression, and suddenly, multiple formation patterns glowed. A voice was actually heard from the conch. "Greetings, Ninth Elder." Go Li called out respectfully first, and then said, "I have found a very impressive sapling." "How impressive?" the other questioned. "If I have not seen wrongly, this person is already able to merge the regulations of the two realms," Go Li answered solemnly. "What?" The other was stunned. "Which demon master is it?" In reply to Ninth Elder, "It is not a demon master, but rather an eternal river tear," Go Li replied. There was suddenly no reply from the other side. Only after a long while did the other side ask, "Are you sure that he has really merged the regulations of the two realms?" "I am 90% sure." Go Li did not confirm it completely. "If that is the case, then I will personally come. Such a sapling can be of use for our alliance," the other side said. "Keep your eye on that person, and you must definitely not lose track of him." Understood. However, Wu Ju was not in a rush to return. It was his first time visiting Cold Cloud's planet, so he wanted to travel around. Ling Han thus made a deal with him. They would meet at the foot of the Black Jade Mountains, and then set off together to see Space Planet. That was the planet where the Hysteria Demon Master resided. Taking this opening, Ling Han finally managed to enter into the Black Tower, and upgrade the Divine Demon Sword. After swallowing the final few pieces of level 13 godly metal, the Divine Demon Sword experienced a qualitative change and broke through to level 14. And he did not just stop there. Ling Han had a great amount of level 14 godly metal in his possession, and easily sent the Divine Demon Sword up to level 15, and then on to level 16. When it had swallowed enough level 16 godly metal, indescribable divine patterns drifted on this divine sword. They definitely had been inscribed on the sword by Ling Han. This was saintly patterns. Theoretically, the Divine Demon Sword is a celestial tool, so what should be drifting on it should be celestial patterns. Then, these perhaps may not be the inscribed patterns of the Divine Demon Sword itself, but rather something that appeared due to it having swallowed innumerable god tool, thus forming saintly patterns, Ling Han surmised. Presently, the Divine Demon Sword was also undergoing an intense transformation, entering into Sang tier. This breach was too wide. Even if it was the Divine Demon Sword, it seemed like it had to undergo a very long process. He observed closely, perhaps this would be beneficial for him. However, he really could not understand. A saint-level item could not be comprehended at all if his cultivation level was inadequate. Ling Han watched for a while, and then gave up. He'd just have to wait and see when he reached the consummate level of the Eternal River tier. As for now, there was no point in biting off more than he could chew. He should first ensure that his grasp of the regulations of the Netherworld caught up. He arrived at the roots of the reincarnation tree. The Empress and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden just happened to have completed their cultivation, and listened to him relate what had previously happened. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was extremely intrigued regarding Mo Li, and wanted to see how hard it was to distinguish her gender. Just in time, and Ling Han explained about how the regulations of the Netherworld and Immortal Realm could be merged to the two women. If they wanted to enter into the Celestial Realm, this was a step that they probably had to take. Chapter 1554, So it su. Chapter 1554, So it su. The two women were greatly inspired. The Empress immediately formed her 9 doppelgangers. They all sat down cross-legged, and were boosted by the reincarnation tree. However, this could only accommodate 10 people, so the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had no means to cultivate. Thus, she decisively exited the Black Tower, and enjoyed some alone time with Ling Han. In any case, she had also grasped some regulations of the Netherworld. From the surface, there was no difference between her and any ordinary being of the Netherworld. On the 8th day, the Divine Demon Sword released a great tremor from within the Black Tower. It had finally advanced into the Saint tier. Ling Han couldn't help but feel rueful. Why couldn't his cultivation be as fast as that? If not, then it would also be good if the Empress could advance into the Saint tier sooner. But Ling Han was still very pleased. This time, the Divine Demon Sword's advancement was really too amazing, it had directly skipped over the 4 levels of the Eternal River tier, and became a saint tool. He drew out the divine sword, and saw that the sword's blade was exuding a gentle luster like the finest jade. Furthermore, there was about it a supreme air that vaguely could suppress all existence. This was saintly might. He drew on it lightly, and the divine patterns on the divine demon sword immediately glowed one after another. However, a frightening absorbing energy was madly sucking on his origin power, which was comparable to him forcibly channeling the indestructible heaven's scroll to take on the attack of a saint head-on. It was only a couple of pulls, and his legs were already trembling with weakness. To activate a saint tool, this kind of consumption was too great. In truth, Ling Han had nurtured and created this saint tool with his own hands, so he should have been able to easily activate it without much effort, but don't forget that he was presently only in the Eternal River tier, and the martial intent that he had integrated had not attained saint tier. Thus, the fact that the divine demon sword could display saintly might was in truth due to the fact that it had swallowed countless godly metal, and had therefore naturally formed saintly patterns. This had nothing to do with Ling Han. Hence, to activate this kind of saintly might, Ling Han would have to pay a very great price. I'll probably be able to attack 2 or 3 times only, Ling Han estimated. And this was because the divine demon sword was a treasured tool that he had been nurturing all this while. If it was another person, how could they possibly activate a saint tool when they were only in the Eternal River tier? They wouldn't be able to do it even if they were sucked dry. This would mean having to choose, he mumbled. Origin power was limited. He could focus it on either attack or defense, and it was impossible to cover both areas. We'll see what the situation is. If there is enough distance, I could attack once then immediately duck back into the Black Tower, or deliver a sudden attack the moment I exit the Black Tower. If I am being targeted by a saint, I will have to use the indestructible Heaven Scroll to save myself. Another 2 days passed, and the time to meet with Wu Ju had already arrived. Thus, Ling Han set out with the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. They had just arrived, and heard Wu Ju angrily exclaim, "You're late, a whole 30 minutes late." He was very dissatisfied with Ling Han. He jumped out, and was just about to point at Ling Han in rebuke when he saw the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. His eyes involuntarily lit up, and he spread out his arms, planning to run over to embrace her. Hey, you're not a 3-year-old toddler." Ling Han smacked the brat away. If it weren't for the fact that he did not have any perverted expression on his face, he would not have just smacked him away. Meanwhile, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden's expression became one of disgust. This youth was a little too enthusiastic, wasn't he? "Sister, it's me," Wu Ju hurriedly called out, wearing an aggrieved expression. "Who are you?" The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden turned to look at Ling Han, and Ling Han shrugged. This brat seemed like he really knew them, and seemed to hate Ling Han very much, but he stuck close to the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. "We've met at the Two-Realm battlefield," Wu Ju continued. Ling Han and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden shook their heads. They had no memory of meeting at all. Wu Ju's face flushed, and he finally exclaimed, "I was that kitten." "Huh!" Ling Han immediately had some recollection. At the time, he had picked up a small beast, and drew the invasion of the armies of the Netherworld in the end. The situation only calmed when he delivered the small beast back to the Netherworld. He had deduced that this small beast was definitely no simple character. As it turned out, it was the son of a demon master. Hold on, going by that line of thought, the Hysteria Demon Master or this brat's mother should have the bloodline of a demonic beast, and that was why he had taken the form of a silver kitten when he was young. He only assumed human form when he advanced into immortal level. Ling Han laughed loudly, and exclaimed, "So it was you. TSK, now that you've met your savior, come and offer your thanks." "You weren't the one who saved me," Wu Ju mumbled, and then he began to fawn. "Sister, I have the primordial divine fluid, and the bright king fruit, and also clear spirit condensed milk. I'll give them all to you." This guy, if Xu Xian saw how this betrothed of hers actually fawned on another woman like this, she would probably charge over and slash him in two, and then tear him into pieces. Finally, she would crush his bones into dust which she would scatter into the sea. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden shook her head with a smile. The small beast had been so cute at the time, but now he had become a bottom. Sigh, she had completely lost all interest. It would be better for her to have her own child with Ling Han. This is good stuff, why would you refuse it? Ling Han stretched out his hand. Hand it over. Pay. Wu Ju's attitude towards Ling Han was completely different, he despised him very much. It's not for you, don't come close to me, let's go, don't make master have to wait. Mo Li spoke up, her tone neutral and completely absent of emotion. Wu Ju was a little scared of Mo Li. When she spoke up, he immediately behaved himself, just like a little brother that was used to being reprimanded by his elder sister. They set off. The Hysteria Demon Master was waiting on a mountain. He was a broad-shouldered man. He swept an eye over Ling Han and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, and then focused his eyes on Ling Han, his eyes widening slightly. He should have seen through to the fact that there were 11 killing formations in Ling Han's body, which brought even him, a demon master, some amount of surprise. But this kind of emotion was only slightly shown. For a demon master, all existence below Genesis tier were ants. Of course, if he had had the chance to chat with Hu Feng, he would not have underestimated Ling Han to this extent. Young man, you saved Jua over a century ago, and I have yet to repay the favor. The Hysteria Demon Master smiled. He did not have the airs of a saintly material, and was extremely bold and unconstrained. What do you want? True origin stones? Divine fruit? Divine pill? Saintly material? Whatever you say, I will fulfill your wish. Ling Han smiled, being neither servile nor overbearing, and replied, Senior, I helped out previously only because I had no wish to see a war erupt between the Netherworld and the Immortal Realm, and do not have any unreasonable request. Thus, you need not take this to heart, Senior. The Hysteria Demon Master paused, and then laughed loudly. What a good youth. Your ambitions are quite far, and you have your own pride. Wu Ju mumbled something, but because his voice was very soft, no one heard what he said. What Ling Han needed now was saintly medicine, and it was not just one or two, but a great amount. However, it was already good enough if a demon master could give him one or two. How could he possibly give him a large amount? Thus, he might as well just leave the favor there. Who knew, it might be used for some other purpose in future. The Hysteria Demon Master waved his hand, and gathered all four of them together. A golden pathway appeared beneath his feet, and it surged towards the galaxy. As he walked, endless galaxies rapidly flashed past behind him. Yet even so, he still walked for over a day before finally arriving at Sea Space Planet. This was on the other end from Cold Cloud's planet. Otherwise, it would not have caused a demon master to walk for so long to reach. Chaotic Demon Palace. Ling Han looked at the colossal mass of buildings ahead of them. Rather than calling this a palace, it would be more appropriate to call it a city. Master. A considerable number of people saw the golden pathway stretch over, and came out to greet them. It's you, a voice shouted by Ling Han's ear. Ling Han turned to look, and couldn't help but feel rueful. It was really a very small world. It was actually Kai Huangji. Chapter 1555, Battling Kai Huangji Again. Chapter 1555, Battling Kai Huangji Again. Kai Huangji, a prodigy of the Netherworld. He was indeed an incredibly powerful king tier, and in a battle of equals, he was in fact capable of suppressing the North Emperor and Stone Emperor. However, when they had been at the Mountain River Forest, Kai Huangji had still lost to Ling Han in the end. Though his gains were not any less because of it, it had still left an ugly mark on his experience. He had brooded on it all this while, but with the Immortal Realm and Netherworld being far apart from each other, he naturally could not possibly seek out Ling Han again for another battle, and erase this humiliation. At the time, Wu Ju had been lost, and the Chaotic Demon Palace had mobilized a great amount of manpower to launch a search for him. Later, Wu Ju had been found, and some promising saplings had also been brought back. Kai Huangji was among those that had been brought back. He was indeed a prodigy. In merely slightly over a century, he had already advanced into the Eternal River tier, and had even reached the medium extreme. Even in the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy, this kind of natural talent was one of the very best. Kai Huangji had never imagined that he would actually meet Ling Han in this place. Yo, it's been a long time. Ling Han waved at Kai Huangji, and was not concerned that the secret of him being from the immortal realm would be leaked out. The Hysteria Demon Master clearly knew who he was, yet he did not say anything. Then, as long as this Demon Master did not make a move, what need was there for him to take others to heart? Kai Huangji clenched his teeth. He had never thought that Ling Han would be so outrageously bold to actually run into the netherworld. Furthermore, he actually managed to perfectly fit into the netherworld. If he had not seen him with his own eyes, even if others pointed at Ling Han and exclaimed that he was a spy from the immortal realm, he would not have believed it. He wanted very much to leap over and fight Ling Han to his heart's content, but when he saw the Hysteria Demon Master standing at the side, he hurriedly exclaimed, "Master, this person is from the immortal realm, and has hidden his identity with some unknown mean." What? Hearing these words, those who had come out to receive them all paled in shock. This was actually a spy from the immortal realm? Ling Han coughed, and said, "Kai Huangji, you can eat whatever you like, but you can't say whatever you like. Just look at me. What part of me looks like someone from the immortal realm? Humph, don't forget, we have met before at the two-realm battlefield over 100 years ago, and have even fought. Don't tell me that I can't even distinguish whether you are from the immortal realm or netherworld." Kai Huangji sneered. Ling Han gave an "Oh. Are you talking about the time that you lost to me?" Everyone heard this, and once again erupted in uproar. Kai Huangji actually lost? No way, though this junior brother was a newcomer, his talent was indeed shocking. He had been claimed to be a second Mo Li, and even if he couldn't become a demon master in the future, it was highly possible that he could cultivate to the pinnacle level of the Eternal River tier, and become a demon master in another sense of the word. Surely Ling Han's cultivation level had been higher at the time, and he had won on the basis of his advantage in cultivation level. That had to be it. Kai Huangji looked both humiliated and angry, and said, "That was because my cultivation level had been forcibly reduced to the Mountain River tier. If I could use my full abilities, I would be able to suppress you with a single finger." Everyone couldn't help but wear strange expressions. Hearing the tone that Kai Huangji had said these words in, it clearly was he that had had the advantage in cultivation level at the time. Fuck, just who exactly was this young man? That was really too amazing, wasn't it? Ling Han roared with laughter, and said, "Then, let's have a spar." Yet Kai Huangji humphed coldly. "Don't think of changing the topic. You are clearly of the immortal realm, yet enter into our netherworld. What are you planning?" The Hysteria Demon Master finally spoke up. "Since he has entered into our netherworld, and gained the approval of the regulations of our netherworld, Ling Han is a man of our netherworld. Never speak of this topic again." This was the will of a demon master. Once the words were out, the whole world would obey. "Yes, Master. Yes, Lord Demon Master." Everyone all obeyed seriously. Though Kai Huangji was defiant, he could only nod obediently. However, the Demon Master merely said that there should not be any bother about Ling Han's previous identity, but did not say that they could not fight him. "Ling Han, then let's fight again." Kai Huangji leaped out. He had gained much of the Hysteria Demon Master's fondness and regard. Thus, he could do some matters that other disciples did not dare, such as issue a challenge right in front of the Demon Master. This time, the Demon Master did not stop them. He merely smiled at Ling Han, and said, "Have a fair battle." Ling Han knew what he meant. If he used his full effort, with 11 killing formations activating at the same time, even Mo Li would be having a headache, so what more Kai Huangji? Thus, in a fair battle, the killing formations naturally could not be used. This was in fact very unfair. Being able to inscribe the killing formations was because Ling Han had cultivated the indestructible Heaven Scroll, and his physique was strong enough. The ability had not just come out of nowhere. However, Ling Han did not mind. In a battle of equals, he was still incapable of winning. That has got to be a joke. "Fine, we'll have a fair battle," Ling Han said, smiling. "Then let's go up into the skies for a battle." Kai Huangji took the lead in charging up into the skies. Ling Han lazily floated up into the skies as well. In a battle of equals, He did not even take seriously rank 3 king tiers, unless they had come from the Forbidden Lands and cultivated celestial techniques. Otherwise, they would not be capable of matching him at all. However, if it really came to that, he would activate the 11 killing formations, and would still be able to deal with everything. Having cultivated the highest level of cultivation technique like the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, would he still be unable to sweep aside all opposition in the same cultivation level? What a joke! Sister, have some melon seeds. When Wu Ju saw that the irksome presence had left, he hurriedly came over to curry favor, and those who were watching his actions were completely dumbfounded. They had never seen their little master so eagerly trying to attract someone's affection. Even the demon master's lips were twitching. This guy had never acted so filial even to him. Everyone turned to look at the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, and felt that though this woman was very beautiful, she was not so beautiful that she could completely enchant and captivate both the mind and spirit. At least there was definitely one or two that could match her in looks in this galaxy, so how was it that she had caused their little master to act like a completely different person? Yet they did not know that when Wu Ju was still a child, it was the heavenly phoenix divine maiden who had taken great care of him, so the impression she left on him was naturally incomparably deep. How could just any woman replace her in his heart? In the skies, Kai Huangji glared coldly at Ling Han, his expression solemn. This opponent that he had once been able to crush to death with a single hand had actually caught up with him in cultivation level. This was really inconceivable. He had gained the careful guidance of a demon master, and added with the fact that his own good fortune was so unnatural that he could simply pick up any natural treasures wherever he went, it was unimaginable that Ling Han actually managed to catch up to him in cultivation level. Multiple demonic patterns lit up on Kai Huangji's arms. He had absolute confidence that he needed not fear anyone and could easily suppress any opponent in a battle of equals. With a sudden roar, he charged out to attack Ling Han. Ling Han was very casual. Even if he did not use the killing formations, merely the strength of his defense was not something that Kai Huangji could penetrate. Even if he did not resist, and allowed Kai Huangji to melt him down through his power of regulations, that would need at least a good few days to actually be capable of causing him some injury. He raised his hand, and multiple patterns similarly lit up. What was strange was that they were not divine patterns, and were not demonic patterns, either. Instead, they seemed to be a combination of both, yet in terms of level, they seemed to be higher. Yi. The Hysteria Demon Master couldn't help but be slightly surprised. The might of such patterns would naturally collapse at the first blow in his eyes, but if he was also pulled down to the Eternal River tier, then the demonic patterns he showed would still be unable to match them. This brat was very strange. Chapter 1556, Comprehension Catches Up. Chapter 1556 Comprehension Catches Up. Kai Huangji also saw this. His brow wrinkled in a slight frown, but due to the strong self-confidence he had, he rushed forwards without any fear, and began his attack. Previously, he had thought he would never have the chance to erase this humiliation. He had not imagined that Ling Han would actually enter into the netherworld. He definitely could not miss this opportunity. Hong, he delivered a punch. Demonic patterns glowed like a demonic lotus that could sever the skies. This was the demonic lotus seal, a technique that had been invented by the Hysteria Demon Master. Ling Han greeted the attack with his own fist. In a battle of equals, he had never shrunk back. Peng! A loud sound rang out, and both Kai Huangji and Ling Han were sent back flying a few hundred meters by the impact. Kai Huangji immediately showed a confident expression. There was not much of a gap between the two of them in terms of power. They were both rank 3 king tiers, and in terms of regulations, he was obviously superior in level. The highest level of regulations that Ling Han could draw on was the low extreme at most. However, the latter's physique was really too strong. He took on the aftermath head-on, and did not sustain even the slightest injury. This freakish guy, how could he have such a frightening physique? Kai Huangji gritted his teeth. Previously, he had already lost once, and now he still had to face this huge gulf between them, which made him feel a depression he could not describe. Ling Han shook his head. After merging the regulations of the two realms, His battle prowess of the same level had been strengthened further by at least another star, but his grasp of the regulations of the netherworld had not caught up. This meant that he was equal to being in the low extreme of the Eternal River tier, and was naturally not a match for an opponent in the medium extreme. This was not something that could be improved in a short while, so he had no wish to fight Kai Huangji for a long time, and improve his grasp of the regulations of the netherworld in battle. He wanted to end the battle quickly. "Senior brother Kai, go." Wu Ju was cheering him on from below. He wanted nothing more than for Ling Han to lose horribly in front of the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden looked at him in displeasure, and the little bottom immediately lowered his head guiltily. He could only secretly cheer Kai Huangji on. The demonic lotus blooms, and all is killed. Kai Huangji shot out both fists, and formed a massive lotus flower seal, which pressed down on Ling Han, intending to suppress him by force. Ling Han smiled calmly, and channeled the tide of the ages with a casual wave of his hand. Decay. 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 When the demonic lotus seal arrived in front of Ling Han, it had already decayed so much that nothing was left, so all its might was naturally lost. The tide of the ages, a celestial technique. Celestial techniques naturally originated from the celestial realm, and what kind of place was the celestial realm? It had the regulations of the netherworld as well as the regulations of the immortal realm. Thus, though Ling Han had entered into the netherworld, the might of his tide of the ages had not weakened the slightest bit, because it was not restrained by the regulations of the immortal realm. In a battle of equals, was a celestial technique not awesome enough? Kai Huangji was gaping in shock. The demonic lotus seal was the strongest secret technique that he had mastered presently, but such a powerful technique did not manage to show the slightest bit of might in front of Ling Han. How could he accept that? Not just him, even the Hysteria Demon Master's eyes narrowed slightly, revealing a hint of curiosity. As it was a technique he had created, he was naturally familiar with it. But in a battle of equals, it was actually dispersed so easily. This was really inconceivable. "Are we continuing?" Ling Han asked, smiling. Whether it was the strength of his physique or the tide of the ages, he was already standing in an invincible position. "Huangji, come on down." The Hysteria Demon Master suddenly spoke up. Kai Huangji hurriedly descended, and half kneeling, he said, "Yes, Master." He knew that this was his master giving him an out of the situation. "I won't believe it. When sister sees how that guy indulges himself in debauchery, let's see if she would still like him." Mo Li crossed her arms over her chest on one side, and poured cold water on his enthusiasm. "If you like a person, you would have enough trust in him. You will not succeed." "Mo Li, why do you have to strike a blow on me?" Wu Ju asked in displeasure, and then he gave himself some encouragement. "I will definitely succeed. I want to show sister the true face of that guy. Ho ho." Mo Li wore a fake smile. That face of hers was practically unchanged. Wu Ju decided to ignore her. He had thought hard for a few months, and only then did he come up with this brilliant plan. How could it fail? Act according to plan. "I will personally observe tonight." He thought for a moment, and then involuntarily smiled foolishly. "When sister is sad, I will go and comfort her, and she will hug me just like she used to." Mo Li was involuntarily rendered speechless. "You are planning to comfort her, and still want her to hug you. As expected, you have not grown up at all." Chapter 1557 Compensation. Chapter 1557 Compensation. Ling Han sat in his courtyard. He was thinking over some matters. Entering into the netherworld was something he had been forced to do. He had no wish to be constantly hunted down by one, or even a whole group, of saints. Now that he had entered the netherworld, he should make some plans and decide on his next course of action. The eternally unchanging plan was naturally increasing his own abilities. Reaching this height in cultivation level, even if he was the alchemy emperor, and could ingest high-grade alchemical pills like they were candy, his advance through the cultivation levels would still be extremely slow. Going by the usual route, he would need at least 100 years before he could advance by one subminor level. This clearly was much too slow. Merely advancing into the Genesis tier would need over 1,000 years, what more blasting into the celestial realm, which would need him to be a great saint, at least a great saint that had merged the regulations of the two realms. If he wanted to increase the speed, that would require the support of saintly medicine, but just how rare were such great herbs? If I could sweep through the forbidden lands, I am sure that every forbidden land would have one or two of such great herbs, at least. But the problem is the forbidden lands have a saint king on guard, and if I had the ability to sweep through the forbidden lands, why would I need saintly medicine? Ling Han was troubled. Could I create a situation in which all the saints would leave the forbidden lands? Then I would be able to take advantage of the crisis. Would a situation like that appear? Putting that aside first, aside from improving my own abilities, there is the divine demon sword. I have to work hard on boosting it up to level 18, 19, and 20, and if there is enough top-grade saintly material, it can even become a celestial tool. Ling Han's eyes flashed. If the divine demon sword could take that step, he would really be invincible in both the netherworld and immortal realm. Even if his opponent was a saint king, he could kill him with a single strike. This can still be considered a plan, but to obtain so much saintly material seems to be even harder than obtaining saintly medicine. Ling Han sighed. The farther one walked on the path of cultivation, the steeper and narrower the path would be. Not only did one have to work hard on conquering dangerous peaks, he would also have to compete with those on the same path because this path could not accommodate too many people. If I have the chance to, I will ask the Hysteria Demon Master to see if there is any way to madly increase the rate of accumulation of origin power. I have the reincarnation tree, so comprehension of cultivation is not an issue, and the largest problem for others is already resolved in my case. Peng, peng, peng. Just when Ling Han was deep in thought, a knock sounded on the main doors. Ling Han was distracted, and used his origin power to open the doors. He saw an extremely beautiful woman was presently standing prettily at the doorway, her eyes casting coy glances at him, her lips curled seductively and filled with an alluring grace. Brother Han. This woman rushed in immediately, and looked like she was about to pounce into Ling Han's arms. But when her eyes swept over the surroundings and discovered that Ling Han was alone, she suddenly stopped. In a hurry, she loudly called out, "Brother Han! Brother Han!" She called twice in quick succession as if she was deliberately calling out his name for others to hear her. Ling Han was at a loss at first, and then he smiled. "Wu Ju sent you?" The woman was surprised, and then quickly shook her head. With an alluring smile, she said, "Brother Han, what are you saying? I have especially come to develop a relationship with you because I like you." She dealt with Ling Han's question, and then loudly called out, "Brother Han! Brother Han!" Ling Han shook his head. This Wu Ju was really a kid. He thought that just because he used feminine wiles to put on a show, he would be able to drive a wedge between himself and the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. This was really the naive idea of a child. He did not stop her, either. He wanted to see what kind of tricks Wu Ju was up to. In just a short while, another knock sounded on the doors. Ling Han again opened the doors with his origin power, and another delicate, charming woman entered. "Brother Han," she also called out gently. Her eyes swept over the first woman, and seeing the strange expression on her face, she couldn't help but look around the surroundings. When she did not find her other target, she couldn't help but be surprised. There was only the male lead here, so how was she supposed to make the show go on? Ling Han smiled, and asked, "You also admire me, and have thus come to offer yourself for a place in my bed?" The second woman blushed, a hint of embarrassment and fury in her eyes, but she did not fly into a rage. She only nodded very, very slightly. Ling Han smiled, and said, "Then what are you standing around for? Undress quickly. Time is priceless, so don't waste it." Both women were greatly shocked. "Are you a damn pervert? You actually intend to put on a show right in the middle of the courtyard? And you even want to have two partners at the same time? Shameless. Hoodlum. Seeing you are both so shy, looks like I have to make the first move." Ling Han moved, and the two women immediately shouted shrilly. They wanted to flee, but how could they possibly escape from Ling Han's grasp? He merely pressed down once, and the movements of both women were sealed. As they watched Ling Han coming closer and closer, his stare perverted, both women paled in fear. One of them could not bear it any longer, and said, "We don't know you at all. It was little master who had us come here." Ling Han chuckled, looked at one corner, and then called out, "Come and take them back." Wu Ju was presently hiding at the top of a tall tower far away. When he saw Ling Han's gaze being directed at him, he hurriedly lowered his head, as if as long they didn't make eye contact, it did not count as him having been found out. Mo Li shook her head. When would this little master finally grow up? Not just physical growth, but also spiritual and mental maturity. She leaped out, and descended into Ling Han's courtyard. "Sorry that you had to see that," she stated calmly. Ling Han smilingly said, "It's just a little kid." Though Wu Ju had hidden very far away, his ears were pricked high, and he was presently listening to them. When he heard that, he couldn't help but fume. He was not a little kid. Mo Li waved off the two women, and said, "Leave." "Thank you, Mo." They did not know whether Mo Li was male or female, either. Usually, they would not have the chance to greet her. Mo Li did not give them another look, but instead directed her gaze on Ling Han, and said, "Little master is still young, so he is unavoidably rash in his actions. To compensate you, I have a suggestion. Another month later, the Ocean Dragon Mountains will be opening, and we can give you a place of entry." Ling Han smiled, and asked, "And what is the Ocean Dragon Mountains?" "An ancient site, and it has great benefits for those beneath Genesis tier," Mo Li stated calmly. "This ancient site is not located in the Aurora Galaxy, and is under the combined authority of over a dozen demon masters. Furthermore, the entry quota is extremely limited. Even for our chaotic demon palace, only 10 people are allowed to enter." From these words, it was evident how much of a say Mo Li had in the chaotic demon palace. Merely 10 people were allowed to enter, and she could leave one place out of the 10 for Ling Han without consulting others. "All right. I'm free, in any case, so I'll just go take a look." "Oh, right." Ling Han paused. "Isn't Lord Hysteria capable of creating spatial god tools? Don't tell me that people can't be kept in a spatial god tool and then brought into the ancient site." Mo Li looked at him as if she was looking at an idiot. "If a spatial god tool forcibly travels to some small worlds, it will cause the god tool to collapse. So that's how it is." Ling Han nodded internally.